The Valanthi Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships filled the darkness between worlds like silver dust. Their armies had conquered 100 species. Their technology was old and perfect. No one had ever truly challenged them. Then they met humanity. The war lasted 3 years. It should have lasted 3 weeks. The Valanthi had better weapons, more ships, and soldiers who had trained for centuries. Humans had none of these things. They had rusty ships and simple guns and soldiers who lived barely 100 years. But humans did not know how to surrender. They fought in ways the Valanthi had never seen. They crashed their own ships into enemy fleets. They blew up their own stations rather than let them be captured. They sent soldiers on missions with no hope of return, and those soldiers went gladly. They were insane. They were terrifying. After 3 years, the Valanthi had lost more ships than in any war in their long history. The humans had lost far more. Entire planets had burned. 40 billion humans were dead. But still they fought. Still they built more ships and trained more soldiers and came back for more. High Empress Kalith Vorani was not a fool. She looked at the numbers and saw the truth. The Valanthi could win this war. But the cost would break her empire. So she did something her ancestors had never done. She asked for peace. The humans agreed, but they had one condition. There would be a marriage. A political union between a Valanthi royal and a human officer. This was an old tradition among humans, a way to bind two families together. The Valanthi found it primitive, but they accepted. Kalith chose her younger sister for this duty. Sarilyn Vorani was young by Valanthi standards, barely 400 years old. She was beautiful in the way of her people, with silver skin and dark purple eyes and hair like spun moonlight. She had never married. She had never wanted to. Now she had no choice. The humans sent their chosen groom to meet her. His name was Daniel Shaw. He was a commander in their navy, a man of middle rank and no particular fame. When Sarilyn first saw him, she felt insulted. He was small. All humans were small compared to the Valanthi. But Daniel was not even tall for his kind. He had brown hair cut short and plain brown eyes. His face was ordinary. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations except for a few colored ribbons on his chest. He looked like nothing. He looked like no one. Sarilyn had expected a warrior. She had expected someone fierce and frightening. Someone who matched the legends of human madness. Instead, she got a quiet man who smiled too easily and spoke too softly. "It is an honor to meet you," Daniel said. His accent was strange, his words careful. He had learned her language, she realized. Not perfectly, but well enough. "You are not what I expected," she told him coldly. He only nodded. "I get that a lot." The wedding was held on a neutral station, a place that belonged to neither empire. It was a small ceremony. Sarilyn wore the traditional silver robes of her people. Daniel wore his dress uniform. They spoke the words that bound them together, words that meant nothing to her. And then it was done. She was married to a human. They were given quarters on a diplomatic vessel that would take them to their new home. The ship was human-made, and everything about it felt wrong to Sarilyn. The corridors were too narrow, the lights were too warm, the air smelled strange. She hated it immediately. Daniel tried to make conversation during the journey. He asked about her home, her family, her interests. He was polite and patient, and never seemed bothered by her short answers. She found his kindness suspicious. No one was this gentle without reason. He must want something from her. She watched him carefully in those first days. She was trained to observe, to find weakness in her enemies. What she found confused her. Daniel slept only 4 hours each night. The rest of the time, he worked, or exercised, or read. He pushed his body hard, running and lifting weights until sweat soaked his clothes. She learned that humans needed more sleep than this. He was forcing himself to stay alert, to stay ready. Ready for what? One night, an alarm rang through the ship. A fire had started in the cargo bay. Sarilyn's guards rushed to protect her, pulling her away from the danger. She saw Daniel running in the opposite direction. He ran toward the fire. She watched on the security screens as he grabbed equipment and fought the flames alongside the crew. The fire was hot and angry, but he did not stop. He did not even hesitate. When a beam fell, he pushed another crew member out of the way and took the blow himself. They put out the fire eventually. Daniel walked out of the cargo bay with burns on his hands and arms. His skin was red and blistered. A medic tried to treat him, but he waved her away and wrapped the wounds himself. Saralyn found him later in their quarters. He was sitting quietly, his bandaged hands resting on his knees. He did not look like a hero. He looked tired. "Why did you do that?" she asked. He looked up at her. His brown eyes were calm, untroubled. "Do what?" "Run toward the fire. Risk yourself. You are supposed to be important. You are the symbol of this peace." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged, a small movement of his shoulders. "Your guards could have handled it. The crew could have handled it. Maybe. But I was there. So I helped." She did not understand. In her world, important people did not risk themselves. They gave orders. They stayed safe. They let others take the dangers for them. That was the proper way of things. "You are strange," she said finally. Daniel smiled. It was a small smile. Tired, but real. "Yeah, I guess I am." She left him alone after that. But she could not stop thinking about what she had seen. A man who ran toward danger instead of away. A man who wrapped his own wounds and did not complain. A man who seemed to think that helping others was simply what one did. The Valanthi had called humans the mad species. They had meant it as an insult. But watching Daniel Shaw sit quietly with his burned hands, Saralyn wondered if perhaps they had been right. Perhaps humans were mad. And perhaps that was exactly what made them so dangerous. Concordia Station floated in the empty space between empires. It was a place that belonged to no one. Built specifically for this peace. This was where Saralyn and Daniel would live. This was their new home. Saralyn had grown up in palaces made of crystal and light. She had servants who anticipated her every need. She had gardens that stretched for miles, and pools filled with water from sacred springs. She had everything a princess could want. Now she had a small apartment with 4 rooms, and a husband who insisted on making his own food. The first morning, she woke to a strange smell. She followed it to the small kitchen, and found Daniel standing over a machine that bubbled and hissed. He turned when he heard her and smiled. "Good morning," he said. "I made coffee. Do you want some?" She did not know what coffee was. She did not know why he looked so pleased about making it. But she sat down at the small table and accepted the cup he gave her. The liquid inside was dark brown and smelled bitter. She took a small sip and made a face. "This is terrible," Daniel laughed. It was an honest sound, warm and sudden. "Yeah, it takes some getting used to. But trust me, after a few days, you will love it." She did not believe him. But she drank the coffee anyway, because she had nothing else to do. The days on Concordia Station were long and quiet. There were diplomatic meetings sometimes, events where she and Daniel had to stand together and smile for cameras. But mostly, they were left alone. 2 strangers living in a small space, trying to figure out how to exist together. Daniel filled the silence with stories. He told her about his childhood on Earth, in a place called Montana. He described wide open spaces covered in grass and snow. He talked about horses, animals that humans rode for fun and work. He explained a game called football, where people chased a ball across a field and crashed into each other on purpose. Saralyn did not understand most of it, but she liked listening to his voice. It was calm and steady, like water flowing over stones. "Why do you tell me these things?" she asked one evening. Daniel was cooking again, something he called pasta. The smell was actually pleasant this time. He stirred the pot and thought about her question. "Because you are my wife," he said simply. "And I want you to know me. The real me, not just the uniform." She did not know what to say to that. In her culture, marriages were alliances. They were about power and politics. Not about knowing someone, The idea that Daniel wanted her to understand him as a person was strange and uncomfortable, but also, somehow, nice. She began to ask him questions. Small things at first. His favorite food, his favorite color, what he liked to do when he was not working. He answered everything honestly, sometimes laughing at how simple his answers were. His favorite food was something called a cheeseburger. His favorite color was blue, like the sky on Earth. He liked to read books, old books made of paper that smelled like dust and time. Why paper? She asked. Your technology can store 1,000,000 books in a device smaller than your hand. Daniel shrugged. I know. But paper feels different. There is something about holding a real book, turning real pages. It connects you to everyone who held that same book before you. She thought about that for a long time. One night, Daniel told her about his brother. His name was Ethan, and he had been 19 years old when he died. He was killed in the Battle of Proxima, one of the bloodiest fights of the war. Daniel's voice did not shake when he told the story. His face did not change, but Saralyn noticed his hands. They trembled slightly. A tiny movement he could not control. He wanted to be a teacher, Daniel said. He loved kids. He was going to go back to Earth after his service and teach at a school in our hometown. He had it all planned out. He stopped stirring the food. He just stood there, looking at nothing. He never got the chance. Saralyn felt something twist in her chest. She recognized grief. It existed in her people too, though they rarely showed it. But watching Daniel stand so still, holding all that pain inside him, she understood something important. Humans felt everything deeply. They just learned to carry it quietly. How do you continue? She asked softly. Your species lost 40 billion people in this war. How do you simply move forward? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady again, but heavier somehow. We do not have a choice, he said. That is what humans do. We bury our dead. We mourn them. And then we keep going. We rebuild. We adapt. It is the only way we have ever survived. That night, after Daniel went to sleep, Saralyn accessed the station's database. She began to read about human history. What she found terrified her. Humans had nearly destroyed themselves dozens of times. Diseases that killed half their population. Wars that burned entire continents. They had weapons that could end all life on their planet. And they had come close to using them. Again and again, they faced extinction. And again, they survived. They rebuilt cities from ashes. They cured the diseases that killed millions. They made peace after wars that should have ended them forever. No matter what happened, no matter how bad things got, they kept going. The Volanthi had never faced true hardship. They had risen to power in a peaceful part of the galaxy. They had expanded without real resistance. Their empire was built on strength, yes, but also on luck. They had never met anything that could truly threaten them. Until now, Saralyn read about human evolution. They had grown up on a dangerous world, surrounded by predators with sharp teeth and fast legs. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They had only their minds and their hands and their stubborn refusal to die. They had hunted animals 10 times their size. They had survived ice ages and droughts and floods. They had spread across their entire planet, adapting to every environment, conquering every challenge. And then they had reached for the stars. Saralyn closed the database and sat in the dark. Her hands were shaking now, just like Daniel's had. She understood something she had not understood before. The Volanthi had thought they were fighting a war. They had been wrong. They had been fighting for their survival against a species that had clawed its way up from nothing. A species that had faced death 1,000 times and refused to accept it. A species that did not know how to give up. In her room, Daniel slept peacefully. He was just a man from Montana who made coffee and told stories about horses. He was kind and quiet and ordinary, But he carried 40 billion ghosts inside him. And he woke up every morning and kept going anyway. That was what made humans terrifying. Not their weapons, not their ships, not their soldiers, their will. 6 months passed on Concordia Station. Saralyn learned to drink coffee in the mornings. She learned the rules of football, though she still thought it was ridiculous. She learned that Daniel hummed old songs when he cooked, and that he always checked the door locks twice before bed. She learned to like him, not love, not yet. But something close to friendship had grown between them. One morning, Daniel asked her a question she did not expect. "Would you like to visit Earth?" Saralyn froze with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Earth. The human homeworld. The planet her people had tried to burn. "Is that allowed?" she asked carefully. "The diplomatic council approved it," Daniel said. "It would be good for the peace. Show that we can trust each other, but only if you want to." She should have said no. Every instinct told her it was dangerous. She was Valanthi royalty. If humans wanted revenge, there was no better target. But she looked at Daniel, at his open face and hopeful eyes, and she heard herself say yes. The journey to Earth took 2 weeks. Saralyn spent most of it nervous, though she tried not to show it. She imagined a fortress world, covered in weapons and soldiers. She imagined angry crowds and hateful stares. What she found was completely different. The ship landed in a city called Portland. It was green and wet and full of trees. Buildings rose between parks and rivers. People walked on streets without armor or weapons. Children played in open spaces, laughing and chasing each other. It looked like peace. Daniel took her through the city slowly, letting her see everything. They visited markets where humans sold food and clothes and strange objects she did not recognize. They walked through gardens where flowers bloomed in 100 colors. They sat by a fountain and watched birds fly overhead. No one attacked her. No one even seemed afraid of her. People stared. Yes, because she looked different. But their stares were curious, not hostile. Some of them even smiled. "I do not understand," she said to Daniel. "We killed so many of your people. How can they look at me without hatred?" Daniel thought about the question. "Some of them do hate," he admitted. "Not everyone has forgiven. But most people are just tired. They want the war to be over. They want to move on with their lives. I would expect better. The Jesses, it's 5. But the dead, we remember them. We always will. But we cannot live in anger forever. It would destroy us." Saralyn did not understand. The Valanthi remembered every insult, every wrong, for thousands of years. They passed grudges down through generations. Forgiveness was weakness in their culture. But looking at the humans around her, she wondered if maybe they had it backwards. The next day, Daniel took her to meet his mother. Linda Shaw lived in a small house outside the city. It was made of wood and stone, surrounded by trees and a garden full of vegetables. A dog barked when they arrived, a furry creature that jumped and wagged its tail with insane happiness. Linda was waiting on the porch. She was small and old by human standards, with silver hair and deep lines around her eyes. When she saw Saralyn, she did not hesitate. She walked forward and wrapped her arms around the Valanthi princess in a tight embrace. Saralyn went stiff. No one touched Valanthi royalty without permission. It was forbidden. But Linda just held her, warm and soft, and whispered in her ear, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart." Something cracked inside Saralyn. She did not understand it. She did not know what to do with it. So she simply stood there, letting this tiny human woman hug her like she was precious. They spent 3 days with Linda. She cooked enormous meals and told embarrassing stories about Daniel's childhood. She showed Saralyn old photographs, images of Daniel and Ethan as small boys, playing in mud and climbing trees. She talked about her late husband, who had died before the war, and how much Daniel looked like him. She never mentioned the war. Not once. On the second day, Daniel's friends came to visit. 3 of them had served with him in the military. They had fought against the Valanthi. Saralyn expected hostility. What she got was something else entirely. The first was a man named Connor, who had lost his left arm in the Battle of Kepler. He shook her hand with his remaining one and said it was nice to meet her. The second was a woman named Brooke, who walked with a limp from an injury that never healed right. She smiled at Sarah Lynn and offered her a beer. The third was a man named Greg. He had a long scar down the side of his face, pink and ragged. He did not smile. He just looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. Sarah Lynn waited for him to say something cruel, to blame her, to hate her. Instead, he just nodded. "Thanks for ending the war," he said. "I was tired of fighting." They sat together in Linda's backyard, drinking and talking as the sun went down. The humans told jokes Sarah Lynn did not understand. They laughed at old memories and teased each other like siblings. They included her in their conversation, explaining things when she looked confused. At one point, Brooke leaned over and spoke quietly. "I am sorry," she said, "for everything that happened. We did not want the war either. None of us did." Sarah Lynn stared at her. This woman had fought against her people. She had killed Valanthi soldiers, and now she was apologizing. "You are sorry?" Sarah Lynn repeated. "War is terrible for everyone," Brooke said. "We were just doing what we had to do." "Same as your people?" "Probably." Sarah Lynn thought about the Valanthi soldiers she had known. The young ones who had gone to war excited and come back broken. The families who had lost children. The generals who gave orders they did not believe in because the Empress commanded it. Maybe Brooke was right. Maybe everyone was just doing what they had to do. That night, alone in the small guest room of Linda's house, Sarah Lynn cried. She had not cried in decades, not since she was a child, but the tears came anyway, hot and endless, and she could not stop them. She cried for the dead on both sides. She cried for Ethan, who wanted to be a teacher. She cried for the Valanthi children, who grew up without parents because of this war. She cried for herself, for the princess who had been given away like property to secure a peace she did not choose. She cried until she had nothing left. And then Daniel was there. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not try to fix it. He just sat beside her on the bed and put his arm around her shoulders. He stayed with her in the dark, silent and steady, until her tears finally stopped. "I am sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "Everything." Daniel pulled her closer. "Me too." They sat together until dawn, two strangers from different worlds, carrying the weight of a war neither of them wanted. And somehow, in that silence, something changed between them. Sarah Lynn had been sent to marry a monster. She was beginning to think she had found something else entirely. The peace lasted 14 months. Sarah Lynn had begun to believe it would last forever. She was wrong. Admiral Torvash was old even by Valanthi standards. He had served the Empire for 3,000 years. He had commanded fleets that conquered dozens of worlds. He had never lost a battle until he met humanity. That shame burned in him like poison. He refused to accept the treaty. In secret, he gathered ships and soldiers who felt as he did. They called themselves the true Valanthi. They believed the Empire had been humiliated, and they wanted revenge. On a quiet morning, while Sarah Lynn and Daniel ate breakfast on Concordia Station, Torvash attacked. His fleet struck 3 human colony worlds at once. They came without warning, weapons blazing. The colonies had no defenses, no warships, no soldiers. They had only civilians, families who had settled on distant planets to build new lives. Torvash killed them all. 12 million humans died in a single day. Men, women, children. Entire cities burned. The images spread across the galaxy. Footage of destruction that made even hardened soldiers weep. Then Torvash retreated into Valanthi space, daring humanity to follow. Sarah Lynn expected chaos. She expected human ships to flood across the border, hungry for blood. She expected the peace to shatter into a war worse than the first. Instead, there was silence. Daniel received a message from Earth Command. He read it on his personal screen, his face perfectly still. When he finished, he deleted the message and said nothing. "What will your people do?" Sarah Lynn asked. He looked at her with eyes that had gone cold and distant. She had never seen him like this before. It frightened her. "Whatever is necessary," he said. Days passed. Then weeks. The human government made formal protests. They demanded that the Valanthi Empire hand over Torvash for justice. The High Empress refused, claiming she could not find him. Everyone knew she was lying. Torvash was a hero to many Valanthi, and arresting him would cause unrest. Saralyn watched the news feeds with growing fear. She waited for the human fleet to come. She waited for the bombs to fall. She waited for the revenge that must surely be coming. 2 months after the attack, she got her answer. Torvash's fleet was found drifting in dead space. All 47 ships. They floated silent and dark, their engines cold, their weapons powered down. A salvage team was sent to investigate. What they found made no sense. Every ship was intact. The hulls were undamaged. The weapons had never been fired. The systems all worked perfectly. There had been no battle, no attack, no explosion. But every single crew member was dead. 18,000 Valanthi soldiers lay where they had fallen. Some were in their beds, some were at their stations. Some were in the middle of meals, their food still on the table. They had died quietly, peacefully, without even knowing they were in danger. The doctors examined the bodies for days. Finally, they found the cause. A biological agent, something engineered in a laboratory, designed to target Valanthi physiology specifically. It had been introduced into the water supply. It had spread through the air systems. It had killed everyone aboard in their sleep. No human ship had been detected near the fleet. No human agent had been found. There was no evidence of how the poison had been delivered. It was as if death itself had simply visited Admiral Torvash and taken what it wanted. Saralyn felt sick when she learned the truth. But she also felt something else. Something colder. She needed to understand. She needed to know what humanity was truly capable of. She used her diplomatic access to search classified databases. What she found kept her awake for 3 nights. The humans had files they called black projects. Weapons they had built, but never used. Technologies so terrible that even speaking about them was forbidden. There were plagues designed in laboratories, diseases that could wipe out entire species. There were bombs that could crack planets open like eggs. There were machines that could eat through metal and stone and flesh without stopping. There were computer programs that could destroy civilizations from the inside, erasing records and crashing systems until nothing remained. And there were quiet weapons. Poisons that left no trace. Nanomachines too small to see that could kill without a sound. Ways to murder that looked like accidents. Like nature. Like the will of the gods. The humans had all of these things. They had built them during dark times in their history, when they were afraid and desperate. And they had kept them, maintained them, improved them, just in case. The files included notes from human strategists. They discussed the war with the Valanthi in cold, clinical terms. They had calculated exactly how many weapons they would need to destroy the entire empire. Not defeat it, destroy it, erase it from existence. The number was surprisingly small. They had never used these weapons. They had held back. The war had ended before they reached that point. But they had been ready. They had been weeks away from unleashing horrors that made Torvash's attack look like a child's tantrum. Saralyn found Daniel in their apartment. He was reading a book, something old with a worn cover. He looked up when she entered, and his expression changed when he saw her face. "You found the files," he said quietly. "You knew?" "I knew some of it, not all the details, but enough." She sat down across from him. Her hands were shaking. "You are monsters." Daniel closed his book carefully. He set it aside and met her eyes without flinching. "Only when we have to be. You killed 18,000 people without firing a single shot. They killed 12 million of ours, including children, including babies. So you exterminated them?" "We removed the threat." His voice was flat, empty. "We did it cleanly, quietly, without harming any innocent Valanthi. Torvash wanted a war. We gave him a death he never saw coming, and we made sure everyone else would think twice before trying the same thing." Sarah stared at him. This was not the man who made coffee and told stories about horses. This was something else, something beneath the gentle surface. We do not start wars, Daniel continued. We never have. Every fight humanity has ever been in, someone else threw the first punch. But we finish them. That is what we do. When something threatens our survival, we become the threat. We do whatever it takes, no matter how ugly, no matter how terrible. He leaned forward, and his brown eyes were hard as stone. We are not proud of it. We do not celebrate it. But we do not apologize either. Because the alternative is extinction, and we refuse to go quietly. Sarah thought about everything she had learned. The plagues and weapons and quiet murders. The calculations about destroying her entire empire. The cold efficiency with which humanity had eliminated Torvash and his fleet. And she thought about Daniel holding her while she cried. Daniel making coffee. Daniel running into fires to save strangers. Both things were true. Both things were real. Humans could be kind and gentle and loving. They could also be the most terrifying force in the galaxy. How do you live with it? She whispered. How do you carry both inside you? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. We just do. That is what being human means. We love with everything we have. And when something threatens what we love, we destroy it. Completely. Without mercy, he reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm and gentle, the same hands that had been burned saving strangers. I would burn the galaxy for you, he said softly. I hope you never have to see that. But it is true. Sarah did not pull away. She was beginning to understand why empires fell. The death of Admiral Torvash sent shockwaves through the Valanthi Empire. 18,000 soldiers, gone in a single night. No battle, no warning, no chance to fight back. Just silence and bodies. High Empress Kalith Vorani was furious. She called an emergency session of the Imperial Court and demanded answers. She threatened to resume the war. She accused humanity of murder and cowardice. The human response came through Ambassador Patricia Cole. She was a former general, a woman who had commanded fleets and watched friends die. She had cold eyes and a voice like iron. She stood before the assembled Valanthi nobles without fear. Your admiral murdered 12 million civilians, she said. Men, women, children. He attacked without warning, killed without mercy, and then hid behind your borders like a coward. The court erupted in angry shouts. Ambassador Cole waited until they finished. We responded with precision, she continued. We eliminated the threat without harming a single innocent Valanthi citizen. Your empire still stands. Your people still live. Consider that a courtesy we are not obligated to repeat. The threat hung in the air like smoke. What are you saying? Kalith demanded. Cole looked at her directly. I am saying that Admiral Torvash is dead because he earned his death. And I am saying that if anyone else decides to test our patience, they will meet the same fate. We do not want war. We never did. But we will not tolerate attacks on our people. Not now, not ever. She paused, letting the silence stretch. The treaty stands. The peace continues. Unless you decide otherwise. But before you make that decision, I suggest you think very carefully about what happened to Torvash. And ask yourself if the same fate is worth risking for pride. She turned and walked out. No one tried to stop her. 3 days later, Sarah received a summons. Her sister wanted to see her. The High Empress demanded that she return to the homeworld and testify before the Imperial Court. Daniel offered to come with her. She refused. This is something I must do alone, she said. My people need to hear the truth. And they need to hear it from someone they trust. They will not want to hear it. No, but they must. The journey home was long and lonely. Sarah spent most of it preparing what she would say. She wrote speeches and threw them away. She practiced in front of mirrors and hated every word. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt true enough. In the end, she decided to simply speak from her heart. The imperial court was magnificent. Crystal towers rose toward a purple sky. 1,000 nobles sat in tiered seats, their silver skin gleaming. At the center, on a throne of carved starlight, sat High Empress Calith. Saralyn walked to the speaking platform. She felt small and exposed. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. "You have lived among humans for over a year," Calith said. "You have studied them, learned from them. Now tell us the truth. What are they? What do they want?" Saralyn took a deep breath. "They want what every species wants," she began. "To live. To grow. To protect their own. They are not so different from us in that way." Murmurs rippled through the court. Calith raised a hand for silence. "But they are not like us," Saralyn continued. "They do not conquer for glory or expansion. They do not seek dominion over other species. They only wish to be left alone. To build their families and their worlds in peace." She paused, gathering her courage. "And when they are not left alone, they become something we cannot understand." The court was silent now. Everyone was listening. "I have lived among them," Saralyn said. "I have seen their kindness and their cruelty. I have watched my husband weep for his dead brother. I have watched him wrap his burned hands after running into a fire to save strangers. He is gentle and good and patient." Her voice grew harder. "And I have seen the files. I know what humanity is capable of. I know about the weapons they have built, the plagues they have designed, the quiet ways they can kill without anyone ever knowing. They did not use these things against us. They held back, but they were ready." She looked directly at her sister. Admiral Torvash thought he was brave. He thought he was striking a blow for Volanthi honor. He killed 12 million innocents and believed there would be no consequence. He was wrong. She spread her hands. 18,000 soldiers died in their sleep. No battle, no warning. Just death. Delivered so quietly that no one knew until the bodies were found. That is what humanity can do when provoked. That is what they are capable of when you threaten what they love. The court was completely still. Saralyn could see fear on the faces of the nobles, hear it in the silence. "If we continue this war," she said, "we will not simply lose. We will cease to exist. Not because humanity is stronger than us, not because they have better ships or more soldiers, but because they are willing to do what we are not." She thought of Daniel, of his quiet voice, saying he would burn the galaxy for her. "They will sacrifice everything to ensure we fall. They will destroy themselves alongside us if they must. And when the ashes settle, they will rebuild. Because that is what humans do. They survive. They adapt. They keep going. No matter how much it costs. No matter how long it takes." She lowered her head. "We called them the mad species. We meant it as an insult. But we were right. They are mad. They are insane in ways we cannot comprehend. They feel everything so deeply, love so fiercely, that nothing can stop them when they decide to fight." She raised her head again and met her sister's eyes. "I was sent to marry a monster. I found a man who makes coffee and tells stories about horses. A man who cries for his dead brother and would die to protect strangers. He is not a monster, but he is human. And humans will do anything for the people they love." She stepped back from the platform. "The choice is yours, my Empress. We can have peace. Or we can learn exactly why humanity ends empires." No one spoke. No one moved. The silence stretched for a long, terrible moment. Then High Empress Calith Vorani, ruler of 12,000 years of civilization, slowly nodded. "The peace will hold," she said quietly. And it did. 10 years passed. The galaxy changed. Humans and Volanthi learned to trade instead of fight. Old wounds healed slowly. Children were born who had never known war. Saralyn and Daniel moved to Earth. They built a small house in the mountains of Montana, not far from where Daniel had grown up. They had a daughter named Lyrian, a beautiful child with her mother's purple eyes and her father's stubborn chin. One summer evening, they stood on their balcony and watched the sunset paint the sky in orange and gold. Below them, Lyrian chased fireflies in the garden, laughing with pure joy. "Do you regret it?" Daniel asked. "Marrying me. Leaving your empire behind." Saralyn leaned against him, feeling his warmth. "I was sent to marry a monster," she said. "Instead, I found a man who makes coffee in the morning and cries at sad movies, and would burn the galaxy to protect his family." She smiled, soft and tired. "The Valanthi believed we were gods. We ruled the stars. We had never met anything that could threaten us. And then we met humanity, and we learned that we were not gods at all." She turned to look at him, at this ordinary man from Montana who had shown her what love really meant. "We were simply the first to fall." Daniel said nothing. He only held her closer. Below them, Lyrian caught a firefly in her small hands. She lifted it toward the sky, toward the stars that glittered in the growing darkness, and laughed with wonder. The galaxy was vast and cold and full of dangers, but in this small corner of it, surrounded by mountains and fireflies and the people she loved, Saralyn had found something she never expected. She had found home, and she finally understood why humans fought so hard to protect theirs.